Hey everyone, welcome back to the Empowered Educator. So glad you're back. You're here. I'm recording on Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. And you survived Friday the 13th. A little funny, yesterday morning I was greeting students at my campus and someone said, I didn't want to come to school today. I just wasn't feeling it. And I said, yeah, me too, especially because it's Friday the 13th. And they looked at me and said, Miss, come on, that only happens on Halloween. And I was like, okay, I'm going to take it. But Friday the 13th was pretty good for us, actually. It was just busy with Valentine's parties and all of the things. But whatever yours was, you survived. You did it. That's what I always say. We got this, and we can do hard things. So this week, I want to talk about a journey that I had. And actually, it hit me a little harder when I became the principal than when I was in the classroom. Very relevant to what we're going to talk about today. But this month, I'm talking about emotional safety in classrooms and in school buildings and how we support all of our students so that they can be their best. And when I started teaching in 1995, I actually had a classroom that was designed for a very specific person, someone who had lots of years of experience, a lot of training, and was working with the campus to do more of an inclusion model in her classroom. So it was planned that she would have half of her class made up of students with IEPs, and then the other half either were second language learners or gifted and talented students. She was going to be in a co-teach model, so the special education teacher was going to be coming in for a period of time. And back in 1995, that was pretty unheard of. As a matter of fact, I had some work in college about how to support students with IEPs, but I really learned most of my skill set at that point, which was minimal, from my own brother. My brother is dyslexic, and in the state of Iowa, that has always been under the special education umbrella. And it wasn't until I got into college, he was in seventh grade, had one of my former teachers who became one of my professors in college, very small town, you know how it goes. And we were working on him as a case study and actually got him tested and into the program because we knew he was struggling. That was my knowledge. That was the extent of it. And I didn't really know much. I didn't really understand a whole IEP except for the very little training I had had and or how the IEP gets implemented in a general classroom. And we give the supports of the accommodations to students. As a matter of fact, they would throw around words like accommodations and modifications, and I had absolutely no idea what the difference was between the two. And sadly enough, I taught all 4.5 years in the classroom, and I don't know if I still knew the definition of an accommodation versus a modification. It wasn't until I started working on my master's and decided to go into school leadership that I thought, oh, I better learn this, right? If I'm going to be leading other people. But it just turned out that once I became a school leader, especially once I hit that first principalship, I noticed that a lot of families were having a lot of trouble accepting labels on their student or their child, our student, their child, right? Especially in the area of autism. The whole system at the building I first took over was messed up. And I've talked about it through this series here on YouTube, but just to give you a short synopsis, I took over a school that was in a lot of trouble. And I was an assistant principal the year prior, and was with somebody who totally made it worse than what it was when I walked in on the first day. He was removed in February of the prior year, escorted out of the building, as a matter of fact, with law enforcement. And things, we just had to get through the remainder of the year. I was put in as an unofficial interim principal with some support from the district, which they were great. And then they approved me to become the principal and they gave me the ultimatum, we got to fix this school. But one thing I noticed, in addition to how I needed to support my staff, was needing to support the students as well. So I would walk through the halls and I would see our students with IEPs sitting in the corners of the classrooms with color sheets. And we weren't just talking about kindergarten or first grade, not that that would be okay, but we were also talking about fourth and fifth grade. I was noticing that not even just that special program, but my second language learners were in these classrooms where they were only teaching in Spanish. And so my fifth graders who were transitioning to an English classroom in sixth grade could not even sit down and have a conversation with me in English. And I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, what kind of system are we running here for our students who need these specialized programs and specialized support? So it wasn't just the mere fact of thinking about what I was doing with our students with autism, but with our students who needed different kinds of programming rather than just our general tier one instruction. But our students with autism stood out to me a little bit heavier because parents really, really struggled with understanding the label, knowing how to support their children at home and at school. My teachers didn't understand the label, nor did they understand how to support the students in their classrooms. And I didn't even really understand the label. I didn't have any background knowledge of this diagnosis. And it was scary. It was scary because it was unknown, not because the students were scary, but because the diagnosis is unknown and there's so many levels that could take, students could experience and so many different, what do you want to say, so many different ways to work through their educational programming that it was a lot of big learning. Now, most recently, as a matter of fact, it was in November or December, I was asked to be part of a project that's coming out in April, Daring to Belong. It is an anthology of, I believe there are 8 authors altogether, and we contribute to this book by sharing our knowledge and expertise, whether we're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a school principal in my case, or anything in between. And I've been meeting with the ladies that are all contributing to this because I don't know them all. And everybody has such a profound story that can be so helpful to so many different entities. And I really think about not just how did I do it as a campus principal, which is extremely important, but then how does that translate down into the classroom? And so that's where I want to really focus today because you all are out there in the trenches. You walk in every day, lesson plans in hand, all intention of doing everything you possibly can to get your students to be the best that they can be, right? You walk in hoping that it's going to click for a student. And many of us walk in, just like I did, going, what's the difference between an accommodation and a modification? Yeah. And for those of you out there who don't know, I'm going to give you the short version. An accommodation is when we accommodate the work that we're doing in the general classroom. We're not taking it off grade level. We're not saying don't do the work. We're not giving color sheets. We're accommodating it. So we might give 5 problems instead of 10 if they're all the same, right? Or we might read it out loud to a student if they're dyslexic rather than having them have to struggle through it. Or we might even just give them a word bank to use. A modification is when you're actually changing grade level content. So you're maybe a 5th grader, but you're modified down to a 2nd grade level. A modification might be, I'm changing up the entire way we ask these questions so that they're much more simplistic so that the student can understand them at their level. So that's just a little support for those of you out there who needed it. So as I started to work through thinking about the work I did as a campus principal, I also had to think about how do I support my teachers in the classroom? And I hired some really great special education teachers over the years. I'm going to be honest. One teacher throughout my entire 16 years as a principal, unfortunately, just wasn't the right fit and we had to part ways. But other than that, in 16 years, I had such an amazing staff. of special education staff members. They took care of me. We had great relationships. They knew I was going to take care of them. They took care of our kids, which was most important. And they did everything they could based on their knowledge to support our teachers in the classroom. As a matter of fact, my first team I brought on board, we went through a whole training on how do we actually do inclusion and how do we do it right. We've gone through training for supporting our students with neurodiversity and needing to maybe think about things a little bit different. We even house some of the most modern, I'd say, programs on my campuses, bringing in littles beyond what we typically do in a public school to have the support with a preschool type of program, even before they were old enough to go to preschool, because we wanted to hit our children early. Just amazing, amazing programs, amazing people that worked with me. And I learned a lot from all of these people over the years. I have to tell you, someone was interviewing me on a podcast the other day and she called me an expert. And I said, whoa, 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 wait, I'm not an expert in this area. And she goes, you've been doing this for so long. You are an expert. And I had to step back and think, okay, maybe, right? But then it came to thinking about my general education teachers. And what I realized and where I had to pivot and do things differently as I continued on my path as a principal was that just because my special education staff was so knowledgeable and so supportive, it didn't mean that my general education teachers knew what to do. And even thinking about it when the support staff wasn't in the classroom, right? It brought me back to working with one of my students my third year as a teacher. And I remember when my co-teacher would come in and I would feel so relieved. I would feel like, okay, if anything goes wrong, she's here. I know we can handle it. And the moment she would walk out, I felt like, oh, I don't know what to do. Just like the feeling when that podcaster called me an expert, right? It's that feeling of security as a gen ed teacher, in addition to having the knowledge and the skills and the strategies and know where to go when you need the help. So I started looking at my entire staff completely different. And I started thinking, what do they need to know that is basic enough that it's not going to interfere with the time that they spend planning lessons? Because really, gen ed teachers aren't in charge of the tier 1 instruction. And I want that to be amazing. I want the classroom management to be amazing. And then that's when my special ed staff would come in and support with all of the other things. But I quickly realized that there was some things that my gen ed teachers needed to make the tier 1 instruction amazing, the classroom management amazing, especially with our students with autism. We had every end of the spectrum, from the very high functioning to the very challenging, and in everything in between. And sometimes, because of state regulations and things, students were required to take our regular state assessment, even if we felt like maybe that's not the best assessment for them, which made us have to learn how we could get them in the gen ed classroom and teach them the general ed curriculum so that they could be ready for the test. I'm giving you a lot of information and I don't want to overwhelm you, but I want you to know this journey has really brought me to a place where I can speak to the fact that working as a classroom teacher, when you have a very diverse group of students, especially students with autism, in your classroom, can be very overwhelming. And I've seen it firsthand this year working with one of my clients who is a teacher with a student who's in the classroom with a diagnosis of neurodiversity. And there's not a lot of supports in place at that teacher's school to be able to support her and getting the student to be able to work. And so she has shared with me that she doesn't feel like she's doing her best job with that student, that that student is coming in and wants to just sleep all day or color all day or play all day, where she has to get her other 22 students working, convince them that this other student is not getting special treatment and keep everybody motivated, but still be responsible for her autistic student to be able to do the best that they can academically. It's been a vicious cycle for her. And at one point, I had to talk to her about not leaving the profession because it was so overwhelming. Now, if you're experiencing any of this or you have in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't yet, it could be coming. It really could. So here are a few things that I think are very, very important. As a classroom teacher, if you find that you have a student who has this diagnosis, that they're on the spectrum somewhere, and you may not have the knowledge and skills to know exactly what to do. I think the first thing to do is build relationships. And I make that general on purpose. You need to build a relationship with the student. The student needs to see you as somebody that they can be safe with. They need to see you as somebody who is going to push them. You're not going to just let them do what they want, but you're also going to support them the best way you know how. You have to love them and care about them, even on the days that are really, really hard. You can hear I'm doing laundry today. It's Saturday, so sorry about that. Then you also have to build the relationship with the family. The family is nervous. They're overwhelmed. They're scared. They don't know always what to do. They are getting information from so many outside sources. Some information very positive, some information very negative about schools and how things have been handled with different families over the years. If they see that you care enough to build a relationship, that you have an open line of communication, that you want to work as a team, it is going to make it so much better. And this is something I share in that book project. I made a point to just have a regular conversation with these families when I would see them first. How was your weekend? What are you doing for the spring break? Because they're on 24/7. They don't get a regular life, whatever regular is, right? So keep that in mind. And then the relationship with your special ed support staff, because you don't want a relationship where I don't know what to do and you're not helping me. Or I'm not trained in this, so you have to figure it out. You're a team. That's the commitment we make when we take on our teaching assignment. And we take on all kids that are assigned to us, right? I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I know that it's not the best case scenario. And I know that when you don't have the right support, it can be even harder. So build those relationships. The second thing is get to know the student's IEP well and know exactly what the supports are and why they're in place. I've seen a lot of teachers say to me over the years, okay, but I don't understand this if-then board, and I used it once and it didn't work. Here's the thing about it all. A one and done is never going to work. We got to have training. We got to have preparation. We got to have understanding. We got to have the skills to do so. And it's both sides for the student and the teachers. There are systems that might be put in place that might not work, but one time of using it, that's not valid data to say something works or not. Because with our students who are neurodiverse, they need it to be generalized. They need it to be a consistent system. Make sure you understand what those supports are, why they're being assigned, and how to use them effectively. And then you collect data over time. And if you have that great relationship with your special ed support staff, then you're already going to have a plan to do so. And then this final one, and I'm just going to preface it with, it's going to make a few people angry, and I love you. And I wouldn't say this if I didn't have this much experience and I wanted to protect you as a teacher. Think about the way you're communicating. I have seen students on the spectrum do really, really well in classrooms because the teacher stays calm. The teacher follows the plan and is very matter of fact when things go sideways. They didn't take it personal. They didn't get all flustered and upset. Even if they didn't 100% understand the plan. And that's what made that student's school year amazing. And I've seen the exact opposite. I've also seen teachers who have had amazing communication with families. And it wasn't every minute I'm calling, because I've seen that too. Every single thing that goes wrong, I'm calling the parent about and blaming the parent and making the parent upset. But having some kind of communication system with the parent so that you are capturing what has happened throughout the day, but not in a way that's just nagging, right? And how you say things, y'all. It is going to make a huge, huge difference. A couple of years ago, right before I left the principalship, I had some people on my staff, and they were getting a little bit frustrated, and they were working with a student that was significant, very significant. And unfortunately, they also had some personal things going on. And the student did something that wasn't surprising according to the student's normal behaviors and the things that we had seen. But this staff member just kind of got to a place where they were at their limit and said the words, "I just don't want them to become a sexual predator." Now, I'm going to be honest with you. My kid is my world. She's almost 36, and she's my world. And if she was a student with these significant needs, and someone called me and said that, I think I would too would have a extreme problem. There are ways to say those things without using those trigger words. And if that's what you're really concerned about, talk with your school leader before you have that conversation to figure out the right way to say it. I may say something like, "This has been a significant issue today that does violate student code of conduct and the privacy of other students." And I always use this. And I know if your child was on the other end of this and somebody did something like that to him or her, you would want me taking it very serious. I'm telling you, that de-escalated so many situations before they even had a chance to get out of control. Just that statement. And then I would say something like, "Now I know that this is going to be a rough situation. We're working on the investigation. We will have data for you. I want to be very objective as I can, but please keep in mind that my job is to protect every student in the classroom. And I don't want you to hear me say, I think your child is bad. We just have a situation that we have to resolve." Yes, there are still going to be parents that are upset about the situation, but they're not going to necessarily be upset about the way you communicated it. Now, we can't have that kind of communication when you're in the thick of it. I'm going to promise you, take a minute to breathe, step back, and like I said, communicate with your team of people so that you can be as professional as possible, still give the right information, but not in a way that's going to totally set off a parent. Because remember, I said they're on 24/7. This is their baby. So as we're wrapping up for today, build the relationships. Know those IEPs, why they're there, and put them in place. Know how to do that. And then finally, think about that communication because it's all about how you say it, not what you say. All right. Have an amazing week ahead. Yeah. I know at the end of this week, I'm going to be heading to the hospital with my daughter. She's about to have my first grandchild, and I couldn't be more excited. But having said that, just go out there, do some amazing things. And don't forget, if you want support on this, the Uncommon platform is open. It's a monthly membership, $30 a month. It gets you as many professional development sessions as you could possibly need. And if they're not there, you reach back out to me and I'll put them there because I want this to be a place where you can access things that are very timely. They don't take up your whole day, that they're actionable, that you can actually go and use them immediately, and that they meet the needs of all of the people in the membership. It is our place where we learn how to do hard better. Okay. If you enjoyed this, please share it out with a friend. Leave us a review. Let me know how it's going for you. And again, if you need that support, let me know because I am here to help. I'll see y'all next week right back here on the Empowered Educator.